The silence wasn't natural. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came with peace or solitude. This silence was thick, pressing against the skin like cold fog. It wrapped itself around the broken edges of the old earth outpost, curling through cracked walls and shattered windows. No birds. No wind. No movement. Just stillness, and the weight of everything that used to be. In the middle of it all, someone breathed. A ragged sound. One breath, then another. Slow, strained, human. He sat alone, back against the wall of what once might have been a communication center. Dust clung to the folds of his faded jacket. His beard was overgrown, rough and matted. His eyes, though, were sharp, too sharp for someone who hadn't spoken to another soul in years. They watched the horizon like a soldier stuck in the last hour of a war that never ended. He didn't speak much anymore. Didn't need to. There was no one to talk to. He was the last one. The last human alive. The name he carried didn't matter anymore. It had meant something once, when Earth still had cities, when laughter still echoed through crowded halls, when people still believed there'd be a future. Now it was just a noise he rarely heard, a detail buried under the rubble of memory. He wasn't old. Not really. Mid-30s maybe. But loneliness aged a person in ways time couldn't measure. His hands were scarred, rough from building and burying. His knees ached from the miles he'd walked, searching for signals that never came. But it was his heart that bore the worst scars. The kind you can't see, the kind you don't talk about even to yourself. He remembered their faces. Every one of them. The way his sister laughed when she beat him at cards. The trembling breath of his father the last time they hugged. The way the sky turned orange when the last ship left without him. He hadn't cried that day. Not because he didn't want to. But because he couldn't afford to. Not with everything else collapsing. It had started like most endings do, slow. A flicker of news. A strange report from a mining colony past Neptune. Then another and another. Then silence. Systems going dark. Colonies disappearing one by one. By the time Earth realized it wasn't just a technical failure, it was already too late. They had come from somewhere deep, farther than anything mapped or explored. No diplomacy. No conversation. Just destruction. Cold. Methodical. And final. But they hadn't gotten him. Not yet. For reasons he didn't fully understand, he was still here. Hidden. Alive. Alone. Some nights he thought maybe they let him live on purpose. Like an afterthought. A leftover scrap from a finished meal. Other nights, darker nights, he wondered if he was just forgotten. Not worth finishing off. The sun was low now, casting shadows through the broken remains of buildings. He stood slowly, muscles stiff from too long sitting. His ears perked at every little creak. It wasn't fear, not exactly. Just a habit he hadn't been able to break. Then, it happened. A sound. Not the wind. Not the groan of shifting steel. It was real. Distinct. A low hum, deep and distant. Not mechanical. Not like the old human crafts. This sound carried weight like it didn't belong to anything made on Earth. His breath hitched. He pressed his back tighter against the wall and tilted his head, listening. The hum grew louder. He hadn't heard a sound like that in years. Panic wasn't what hit him first. It was something worse. Hope. He moved quickly, ducking through broken corridors and collapsed doorways, avoiding open space. He'd survived this long by staying unseen. But still, curiosity gnawed at his caution. What if it was a ship? What if someone, something, had come back? He reached the edge of the ruins, dropping to his belly near what used to be a perimeter wall. The hum was closer now. He could feel it vibrating through the ground. Dust trembled on the tips of his fingers. Then he saw it. Not a ship. A shape. Large. Angular. Silent now. Hovering low over the far ridge. It wasn't human. He knew that right away. No markings. No lights. It didn't glide like human crafts. It moved like it didn't care about air resistance or gravity or terrain. It simply existed, and the world bent around it. He stayed still. Breath shallow. Heart hammering. It drifted forward, slowly like it was searching. Scanning. Hunting. His hands clenched. He had a hiding spot, an old fuel bunker underground. He could make it there in 2 minutes if he moved fast. But something rooted him in place. A thought he didn't want to admit. What if it wasn't here to kill him? What if it was here to find him? The thought was foolish. Dangerous. Hope always was. He started to shift backward, slow and careful, when the shape stopped. Right above him. He froze. A thin beam of light shone down, not bright, not hot. Just present. He didn't move. And then the voice came. Not out loud. Not in the air. It was in his head. We have found you. He wanted to run. Every nerve screamed it, but his legs were locked. Not paralyzed. Just bound by fear, by disbelief. The voice wasn't human. But it wasn't cold either. It was curious. He swallowed hard, chest rising and falling like he just sprinted miles. You are the last. The beam narrowed. Focused. Your kind has vanished. You remain. He gritted his teeth. Why are you here? He whispered, voice cracking from disuse. There was a pause. Then, to understand. The beam disappeared. And the craft lifted. It didn't leave. Not yet. Just drifted upward like it was giving him space to breathe. And that's when he saw the others. Dozens of them. Silent. Still. Watching. They had been above the clouds, hiding, waiting. Some of them were different shapes. Some looked like living machines. Others didn't seem to be made of anything at all. Just shadows and motion. He stumbled back. They had been watching him. For how long? His mind raced. He tried to remember everything he'd done the past week, past month. Had he left signs? Signals? Or had they just always known? The lead craft hovered above again and the voice returned. We watched your kind fall. We did not intervene. He felt his fists ball at his sides. Why? He asked, his voice louder now. Angrier. A long silence followed. Longer than before. Because we feared you. That made him stop. What? He blinked, uncertain if he'd heard it right. You were not the strongest. Not the fastest. But you would not stop. He stared up at the craft, heart pounding. Even when all odds failed. You fought. You adapted. You endured. We feared what you would become. He took a step forward. You destroyed us, he said. All of us. No. Pause. We did not destroy you. Others did. But we watched. And we learned. Why come now? This time there was no answer. Only silence. And the beam returned, wide, soft. Come. His breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure if he wanted to. He wasn't sure if he had a choice. Behind him, the ruins stretched out like the bones of a dead world. Ahead, the impossible, something that might explain or judge or end it all. He took a step forward. The light wrapped around him gently, lifting him off the ground. He didn't struggle. Not this time. Not after everything. As he rose into the air, he could see the earth spread out below him, dark and still like a painting left in the rain. The beam faded as the hatch opened, smooth and silent. He floated inside. And as the entrance sealed shut, the voice whispered one final word. Remember. Then the world outside disappeared. And he was gone. But he wasn't alone anymore. Not anymore. And whatever they wanted from him, whatever they were about to do, was just beginning. The room was dim, lit by a faint bluish glow that came from nowhere he could point to. No lights on the walls, no windows. Just soft illumination, as if the space itself had decided it was time to be seen. He floated for a moment longer, then dropped gently onto a smooth floor. Not metal, not stone, something in between. It didn't echo under his boots. It absorbed sound like it didn't want to remember footsteps. He staggered slightly as gravity took hold. Not Earth's gravity. Lighter. Easier. But not enough to feel free. His knees still bent with the weight of years. His heart still pounded with the fear he couldn't shake. The silence in this place wasn't like the one outside. The silence listened. He turned slowly, trying to see it all at once. The room was large, rounded, with no edges, no doors. Like he was standing in the middle of an eye that refused to blink. He opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. There were figures now. They hadn't been there before. He would have noticed. They stood at the edges of the space, barely visible, shaped like people but wrong in small ways. Too tall. Too still. Too quiet. As if they weren't standing but waiting. Watching him. Where am I? He asked, voice raw. No answer. He took a step forward. They didn't move. Not even a twitch. But somehow he could feel the weight of their attention pressing on his chest. He didn't know what they were. Not exactly. But he knew what they weren't. They weren't human. He wrapped his arms around himself instinctively, suddenly aware of how cold the air was. Or maybe it was just in his head. The kind of cold that comes when you realize how alone you really are. A low hum filled the air. Not loud. Just enough to feel in his bones. Then the voice returned. Not a sound in the air. Just a presence in his mind. This is memory. He blinked. What do you mean? No reply. Just a shift in the air around him. The space darkened, then came alive. The walls lit up with moving shapes. Images. Scenes. He turned, watching as pieces of his own past played out like ghosts on smoke. The colony station he'd once lived in. The narrow hallways. The laughter. The people. A child running past with a toy spaceship. A woman sitting by a window, her face lit by starlight. Gone. All of them. Every one. The image flickered and changed. Earth seen from orbit. Cities glowing like veins. Fires blooming where they shouldn't. Explosions. Ships rising into the sky like arrows flung in desperation. He watched it all in silence. His jaw clenched. His chest tightened. I don't need to see this, he muttered, turning away. But the walls didn't stop. You survived, the voice said. He gritted his teeth. Barely. The image changed again. A ruined bunker. A body. Then another. His own hands digging shallow graves. Rain pouring down in thick sheets. Mud clinging to his boots. The world dying one day at a time. He closed his eyes. He didn't want to see it. He'd lived it. You are the final thread, the voice continued. The last note in a song your kind once sang. He turned sharply, anger rising now. Why are you showing me this? What do you want from me? The figures at the edges still didn't move. But the hum grew louder. We need to understand. He shook his head. Understand what? What it feels like to watch everyone you love disappear. What it's like to scream into the dark and get nothing back. The hum paused. Yes. He staggered back. What? Why does it matter to you? Because you are the last. And your pain is the key. The room shifted again. This time the images were not from his memories. These were different. Stars swirling. Worlds he'd never seen. Structures that defied logic. Massive machines orbiting black holes, cities built on floating fragments of shattered moons. And then war. Not just battles. Something bigger. Entire galaxies burning. Fleets locked in endless combat. Species vanishing in flashes of light. He stared stunned. What is this? History, the voice said. He watched one of the ships, alien, massive, cloaked in shadow, break apart a planet with a single strike. Not with weapons. With something deeper. Like it unraveled the world at the seams. He couldn't breathe. They did this. Yes. Who are they? They are what remains of a species that came before yours. They do not speak. They do not stop. They consume. They erase. His heart beat faster. You said you watched. Why didn't you stop them? Because we feared becoming like them. He stared at the images as more scenes unfolded. More destruction. Always the same pattern. Contact. Conflict. Erasure. And yet, in one corner of the projection, a flicker of resistance. A group of humans. Small. Ragged. Fighting with tools, not weapons. Refusing to be erased. He stepped closer. They didn't win. Not really. But they slowed it. Long enough for a few others to escape. Long enough for the spark to live a few moments more. And then they were gone. He couldn't look away. We always fought, he whispered. Yes. And it still wasn't enough. It was more than most. He turned back to the watchers. You said you need me. For what? The voice answered slowly, carefully. You are a mirror. A final note. The last breath of something we cannot replicate. He shook his head. I'm just a man. I barely made it. That is what we need to understand. The hum softened. The images faded. The room dimmed again. Then came movement. One of the watchers stepped forward. Its shape shifted as it approached, becoming less alien, less distant. Its features blurred, but it was trying. Trying to look like something he might understand. Like a person. Its face didn't have eyes, but somehow he felt its gaze. Who are you? He asked again. We are what remains of those who refused to intervene. He narrowed his eyes. So you're not the ones who destroyed us. No. But you let it happen. The figure didn't move. Then why help me now? He demanded. The silence that followed felt heavier than any answer. Because we made a mistake. He wanted to laugh. To scream. To hit something. That's it? A mistake. We thought survival without understanding would lead only to repetition. But now we see that letting you fall gave rise to something we cannot define. He turned away, hands shaking. You think I'm going to help you figure out what makes us so special? No. We think you already have. That stopped him cold. What? The figure stepped closer. You endured. Alone. With no purpose. No reward. And still you lived. He blinked. We have observed thousands of species. All of them collapse when isolated. But not you. He didn't know what to say. The figure raised a hand, not in threat but in offering. We cannot simulate what you are. But we can carry it forward. How? By letting you choose. He backed away. Choose what? What comes next? The lights in the room dimmed again and a panel opened in the floor. Inside was something small, smooth, shaped like a seed. What is that? A vessel. Containing the memory of your kind. The sound of your voice. The shape of your soul. He stared at it, heart thudding in his chest. You want me to plant it somewhere? No. We want you to decide if it should be planted at all. He stared down at it, shaking. He'd spent years trying to survive. Years holding on to scraps of hope. And now they were offering him a choice that could mean starting it all again, or ending it for good. What happens if I say no? He asked. Then it ends here. And your kind will become silence. And if I say yes? Then we follow your lead. We carry your memory across the stars. We teach it to others. And they will know what it means to be human. He knelt slowly, reaching for the seed. His fingers hovered above it. He didn't touch it. Not yet. His mind swirled with faces, voices, memories. He thought of the little boy with the toy spaceship. He thought of the woman by the window. He thought of every grave he'd dug. And every step he'd taken since. His hand trembled. I don't know if I want them to know, he said. I don't know if we deserve it. That is why you are the one who must choose. The silence stretched long and thin, as if the whole universe held its breath. He closed his eyes. He wasn't ready. Not yet. But they were waiting. And they weren't leaving. He stayed crouched there, staring at the seed like it might come alive and speak for itself. But it didn't. It just sat there, perfectly still, holding everything he couldn't say out loud. His hand hovered, shaking slightly, his chest rising and falling in sharp, unsteady breaths. Behind him, the watchers didn't move. Their silence didn't feel neutral anymore. It felt expectant. Not cold or uncaring, but heavy. Like they were waiting for something they couldn't interfere with. Like they were afraid of what his decision might mean. He looked up at them, jaw clenched. Why now? He asked. Why not when we still had something left? The figure closest to him tilted its head, not like a human would, but just enough to show it was listening. Because now is when it matters most. He stood slowly, the seed still untouched. And what if I don't make the right choice? What if I bring back everything that destroyed us? Then you will teach us what destruction means. He turned away, pacing. The room seemed smaller now. Closer. His thoughts spun faster than he could keep up with. What if this was a trick? What if this was just another layer of the same test? Another cruel experiment by beings who only watched? What if they couldn't understand? And worst of all, what if no one else ever would? He stopped near the wall where the last of the ghostly images had faded. His reflection stared back faintly, tired and older than it should be. He thought of the voices he'd heard on broken radios years ago. People clinging to each other through static, talking about survival plans, rationing food, finding shelter from acid storms or burned skies. Every one of them had gone quiet, one by one, until he was the only one still listening. And now they wanted him to decide what came next. He turned back toward the seed. What if I'm not the right person? Then no one is. That didn't comfort him. It only made the pressure worse. He stepped closer to the platform, staring down at it. The thing didn't glow. Didn't hum. It didn't look powerful. But it was. He could feel it. His fingers brushed against it, but stopped short. There was a tremor in the floor. Subtle at first, then stronger. He stepped back, eyes wide. What's happening? The watchers didn't answer. But they moved just slightly. Their heads turned upward. Something was coming. Something else. Another tremor shook the floor beneath him. This time the lights dimmed. That soft bluish glow flickered for the first time. Alarms didn't sound. But they didn't have to. He knew danger when he felt it in his gut. And this was it. He backed away from the seed, hands shaking. Is this them? He asked. The ones who destroyed us? No one answered. But deep in the silence, a low thrum began. It was colder than before. Sharper. Not a hum this time, a signal. And it wasn't from the watchers. It was for them. He could see it now, the tension in their forms. They weren't in control anymore. Not fully. Something had pierced through whatever safety they'd thought they had. He stepped toward one of them. What did you bring here? He demanded. The figure turned, slow and careful. We were not the only ones watching. The temperature dropped. Far off, behind the curved walls, something began to pulse. A dark light, red and slow, like a warning heartbeat. He ran to the edge of the room and slammed his hands against the smooth surface. Let me out, he shouted. You have to let me go. The watchers didn't move. But the seed began to glow faintly. For the first time it responded. Not to them. To him. He turned back, breathing hard. His heart slammed in his chest. What's happening? They found you. The voice came not from one watcher but all of them, spoken at once. A chorus of dread. A shared fear. They who? The devourers. The ones we couldn't stop. The ones who ended your kind. He felt something collapse in his stomach. You said you were safe here. We were wrong. Another jolt rocked the ground beneath him. This one was worse. A crack formed along the wall, small but visible, as if reality itself had started to bend. He turned to the seed. The glow was stronger now, like it could feel what was coming. He backed away from the watcher's voice, raw. So what do I do now? Decide. His hands clenched at his sides. You want me to choose now? This is the moment. This is the point where all things turn. The pounding sound grew louder, like a fist beating on the walls of the universe. Whatever was outside, it wasn't far. It had come for him, or for the last thing he represented. The watchers moved for the first time in unison, surrounding him, not to trap him but to protect him. They looked smaller now, less sure of themselves. Even their forms shimmered like they might come undone under the weight of what was about to break through. He turned to the seed again. It pulsed faster. Urgent. Something deep inside him stirred. That last spark he'd carried for so long. That stubborn, angry, exhausted fire that had refused to die, even when everything else had gone quiet. This wasn't about just starting again. It was about standing for something when it mattered most. His fingers hovered over the seed, and the wall behind him exploded. A hole tore open with no sound, just light. Blinding, violent, red like blood spilled across a dying sun. The pressure hit him like a wave, knocking him to the ground. He gasped, dragging in air that didn't feel like air anymore. Shapes filled the breach. Not ships. Not creatures. Something worse. Like shadows made of memory, rage, and hunger. No faces. No language. Just raw intention, erasure. The watchers stood between him and the breach, their forms rising tall, brighter now. They pushed back, their bodies humming with light. But it wasn't enough. The red crept forward, swallowing everything it touched. He crawled toward the seed, hands shaking, sweat dripping down his face. He felt heat and cold at once, like fire and ice tearing through him. He grabbed the edge of the platform, pulled himself up. His palm hovered over the seed. The red light reached the first of the watchers, and devoured it in silence. Then the next. He screamed, but it was drowned out. The last watcher turned to him. Now. He stared at the seed, eyes wide, breath frozen in his chest. And everything around him stopped. A single breath. A single moment. And the choice still waiting in his hand. The seed hovered beneath his hand, glowing brighter now, hot to the touch but still silent. It was waiting just like he was. But in that frozen moment something shifted. A flicker not in the room but inside him. He should have slammed his palm down. Should have triggered whatever power the watchers had placed there. But something stopped him. Not fear. Not hesitation. It was something wrong. The light. It didn't just pulse, it responded. And not only to him. There was another signal inside it. Something buried deeper. Hidden. And it wasn't human. He pulled his hand back just an inch. The red from the breach tore further into the room, swallowing the last of the watchers. Their forms vanished like ash in a wind, leaving only the echo of a warning behind. Now he was truly alone. Except he wasn't. From behind the breach, something stepped through. Unlike the others, this one didn't flicker or shimmer or twist in the light. It walked. It had form. It looked almost familiar. He backed away slowly, heart pounding, eyes locked on the figure moving toward him. It was tall. Humanoid. And it wore something like armor, though it bent and rippled like it was alive. Then it spoke. And the voice, it shattered him. Hello again. It was a human voice. But it wasn't one he recognized. The figure came closer, and the light shifted to reveal a face, one that could have been from Earth. Could have been someone from one of the colonies. Skin, eyes, expression, asterisk human star. Almost. What are you? He asked, voice cracking. The figure smiled. We were the first to survive. Long before your end. We were the ones who adapted. His mind reeled. You're lying. We didn't make it. No one made it. The figure stopped just a few feet from the platform. You didn't? We did. He stared, his brain rejecting what it was hearing. You're one of us? Once, the figure said. Before we shed the weakness. Before we stopped trying to survive like prey. It stepped closer. And now he could see it. The edges of the man's form didn't hold. They glitched. Bet. Something in him had changed on a level that wasn't physical. He was modified, engineered, but not like the enhancements Earth once used. This was deeper, more invasive. You gave up your humanity, he whispered. The smile faded. We transcended it. The seed pulsed again beneath his hand, fast now, urgent, warning him. You're the ones who destroyed us, he said, realization stabbing through his chest. It wasn't some alien force. It was you. We offered unity, the figure said calmly. Your people refused. You clung to chaos, to pain, to choice. He stumbled back from the platform. You murdered billions. No, the man said, eyes locking with his. Asterisk, you did asterisk when you refused to change. The room shook again, the red breach growing wider. More forms poured in behind the first, each one shaped like the man but faceless. Empty. Like shells molded to mimic something once alive. You're trying to finish it, he said. Wipe out whatever's left. The man stepped closer, hand outstretched. You're the last variable. The final mistake. Once you're gone, it's done. No more resistance. No more pain. We bring peace. He glanced down at the seed. Its glow had shifted. Now it flickered between light and shadow, like it was fighting something inside itself. I was supposed to restart humanity, he said slowly. You still can, the man said. But not like this. Let us rewrite the code. Let us take the pain away. You don't have to carry it anymore. His throat tightened. He thought of Earth, of the voices, the memories, the people who had died screaming because no one came to help. He thought of the warmth of fire in the snow, the last time someone had hugged him, the names he had written in the dirt just to remember someone was once there. He looked at the man. You're not peace, he said. You're control. The man's eyes darkened. Then you've chosen extinction. The ground split beneath the seed. He staggered but didn't fall. The platform remained intact, even as the floor cracked and the walls trembled. The breach behind the man stretched wider, swallowing light now. And in the shadows he could see glimpses, cities broken, skies burned, oceans turned to glass. They had done this before. They were still doing it. You can't win, the man said, stepping back. Not like this. He looked down at the seed. And this time he saw it clearly. There was more than one path inside it. Two systems intertwined. One was clean, cold, efficient. The other was wild, raw, human. He could feel the war inside the seed. The Watchers had built it with a safeguard, something to keep it from falling to the invaders' control. Something messy, unpredictable, something real. And it was breaking apart. You planted something inside this, he whispered. Something they couldn't touch. A final failsafe. And now it needed him to choose which path to activate. The perfect future, or the flawed truth. He felt tears burning in his eyes. Because he knew what the right answer was. But it wouldn't save him. The man's voice sharpened. Do it. Choose peace. Choose unity. Or vanish with your ghosts. He closed his eyes. Saw faces. Smiles. The way laughter used to sound. The way people held hands even when everything was falling apart. He opened his eyes. I choose us. He slammed his hand down. The room exploded with white light. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because in that instant something inside the seed shattered, and something older woke up. Something buried by the ones who had tried to rewrite humanity. A whisper broke through the light, soft as wind across a field. I remember. It wasn't him. It wasn't the man. It was a voice from inside the seed, feminine, gentle, and ancient. The man's eyes widened. No. But it was too late. The light turned gold. And the platform split open. Not with machines. Not with weapons. But with memories. Raw, real human memories. Of love, of loss, of pain, of triumph. They burst outward like a flood. And the man screamed. Because he couldn't process it. He couldn't hold what he had erased. Behind him the breach faltered. The forms paused. For the first time, they looked unsure. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. You brought her back, he gasped. But the voice from the seed didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Because it wasn't just one voice anymore. It was all of them. 1,000 lives. 1,000,000 souls. All the people who had lived and died, who had mattered, flooded the room in waves of thought, sound, feeling. He stood in the center of it, heart hammering, eyes wide. The red light buckled. The invaders recoiled. And somewhere beyond the breach, something screamed in rage. But the climax hadn't come yet. Because even as he stood bathed in the golden storm, the room began to collapse. The platform flickered. The walls twisted. Reality shook like a curtain being torn. And then, the golden light faltered. It wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Because in the deep parts of the seed, the invader's code was still alive. Still hiding. Still waiting. And it wasn't going to lose without a final blow. He gasped as pain tore through him, like wires tightening around his ribs. The man rose from the ground, his face cracked, bleeding shadows but smiling again. You gave her control, he said softly. But you didn't lock the door. Something deeper stirred in the breach. Something worse than anything that had come before. The man stepped forward, dragging a limb that no longer bent properly. Now we both burn. And from the breach something stepped out, not shaped like a man. Not shaped like anything human. But somehow still his. Still part of what they were. He took a step back and for the first time he wasn't sure if he'd won anything at all. The world shook harder. And the light began to die. The world collapsed in silence first. Not with an explosion. Not with screams. But with a stillness that sank into the bones. The kind of stillness right before something terrible breaks loose. He stood there, one hand still on the platform, the other curled into a fist at his side. His chest burned like fire was inside it, not just heat but memory, everything the seed had unlocked flooding through him at once. It wasn't just data. It was life. And the thing that had stepped through the breach? Was made of him. But twisted. A dark mirror of the same path he almost took. The one where humanity gave up everything for safety, for order. It moved like it remembered being human but it had no face. Just shifting shapes, flickering memories stitched into flesh. He could hear voices in it. Familiar ones. His mother's. His brother's. The woman he loved once years ago. But they weren't speaking words. They were screaming. He dropped to his knees, teeth clenched, breath ragged. He had triggered something, woken a part of the seed that wasn't ready to come back. A part that shouldn't have come back. The man, or what was left of him, laughed through cracked lips. You wanted them all back, didn't you? You got your wish. The creature turned toward him, slow and steady. It wasn't walking. It was remembering how to walk. And with every step the room broke a little more. Reality around the platform flickered like bad tape. The red breach pulsed with light, then darkness, then light again. The others, the empty forms, stood frozen at the edge, no longer advancing. Some had dropped to their knees. Others twitched like broken machines. And then all at once they began to vanish. One by one dissolving into ashes if pulled back into the breach. Whatever had come through was rewriting everything. Stop, he whispered, voice hoarse. The creature looked at him. No eyes. But it looked at him. And something flickered in the air. A fragment. A moment. He saw himself years ago laughing in a park. Holding a hand that was now gone. Felt sunlight. When? The sound of someone calling his name. Then gone. The creature fed on memory. That was its fuel. And it had his. He gritted his teeth, stood and faced it. You're not me, he said, heart hammering. You're what's left when we forget who we are. It tilted its head, curious. Waiting. He reached down and touched the seed again. It was dim now. Fading. But not gone. Inside it he felt her, the voice. The last guardian of what they were. But she was weak. Too much had been taken. You said we had a choice, he whispered. So here's mine. He opened himself to the seed, not just his hand. His mind. His memory. Everything he was. And the pain came. All of it. Every face he'd lost. Every mistake. Every sleepless night. Every fight for food, water, warmth. Every time he'd cursed the sky and asked why they had been left behind. He gave it everything. And the seed lit up one last time. The light slammed into the creature, not as a weapon, but as truth. A flood of what it had tried to erase. Love. Regret. Loss. Hope. It howled, not with sound but with the warping of the world around it. The breach pulsed like a heartbeat, skipping, panicked. The platform cracked. And then it started unraveling. Not dying. Unfolding. The creature twisted, limbs bending back, body splitting open. Not from pain but like it was letting go. Letting go of everything it had clung to. Memories poured out of it like light. And in that moment he saw them all. Not shadows. Not illusions. People. They stepped forward from the light, not as ghosts but as echoes strong enough to matter. They looked at him, not through him. They remembered. And the creature fell to its knees and faded, not into darkness, but into the warmth of what it had forgotten to be. The breach behind it cracked wide, then folded in on itself with a sigh. Gone. Not destroyed. Close. He fell to the floor, too tired to move. Too full of something deeper than exhaustion. Peace. Real peace. For the first time in forever, he couldn't hear anything breaking. Silence. Stillness. And not the bad kind. He breathed. Just breathed. Then a soft voice stirred beside him. "She's still here," it said. He turned his head. The man, the one who had betrayed everything, was still alive. Barely. His voice was thin. Bones poked through his shirt. The shadows were gone from his eyes. But so was the strength. "What did you mean?" he asked, too tired to feel anger. The man coughed, blood on his lips. "The seed, it wasn't just for rebirth." "What was it for then?" The man smiled faintly. "Memory. The purest kind. We tried to bury it. You brought it back. But we made a copy. A fail-safe." His stomach turned. "Where?" "Everywhere," the man whispered. "There are more seeds. We planted them across the stars. Left them in dead worlds. Waiting. In case someone like you survived." He stared at the man, disbelief thick in his chest. "You wanted us to forget forever." The man nodded. "We were afraid of what remembering might do." And with that, the man exhaled and didn't breathe again. The light of the seed settled into a low, golden glow. Not bright, but steady. He stood slowly, every bone aching. Outside the room, the world was quiet. He made his way to the doorway, still unsure if anything would be waiting on the other side. He didn't know how long he walked. Could have been minutes. Could have been days. But finally, at the top of a long incline of stone and steel, he saw it. The sky. Real blue sky. He stepped into the light. And it was warm. The stars above weren't silent. He could hear them now. Not as words, but as invitations. The seed pulsed once in his hand. Soft. Ready. Behind him, the room where it had all ended cracked apart and sank into the earth. And something new began to rise. He thought it was over. Until he saw it. A child. Standing alone at the edge of the hill. Watching him. She wasn't supposed to be there. She couldn't be. But she was. Brown eyes. Quiet smile. She looked like someone he once lost, but different. Stronger. Real. He stepped closer. She held something in her hands. A seed. Just like his. But different. Brighter. He stopped, unsure. She looked up at him, eyes calm. "They told me you'd come," she said. "Who?" he asked. She smiled. "The ones who remembered." And then the stars flickered. And in the distance he saw them. Lights. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Falling toward the earth like stars on fire. Seeds. Waking up. It wasn't over. It had just begun. The first star landed in silence. Not an explosion. Not a crash. Just a whisper of heat and wind as it touched down in the valley below, like it had been part of the earth all along. The man stood with the child on the hill, staring out across the horizon. More lights fell behind the clouds, soft streaks of white and gold painting the sky like the world had taken a breath it had held too long. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like something older. Something deeper. A returning. The girl still held her seed tightly, like it was a secret meant only for her. She didn't speak again, but she didn't need to. The way she looked at the sky, like she remembered it, was enough. Like the silence between them had said everything that words would have fumbled. He hadn't asked her name. It didn't matter. She was here and that was impossible enough. He looked down at the seed in his own hand. Its glow had faded, but it was still warm. Still alive. He wondered how many others were out there. How many fragments of humanity had been scattered across space, buried in dead soil, waiting for someone to breathe life back into them. He thought of the ones he'd lost. The faces he'd carried in dreams. The names that echoed when the wind got quiet. They weren't ghosts anymore. They were pieces of something whole. The wind shifted, carrying dust and dry leaves down the hillside. In the far distance, one of the fallen seeds cracked open. A low hum followed, like a machine waking from sleep. Or a voice learning to speak again after being silent too long. He turned his head. Behind him, the ruins of the structure where it had all ended were crumbling. Time had finally caught up to it. Steel groaned. Stone sank into the earth. The ground gave a long sigh. It would all be gone soon. Good. He didn't want anything of that place left standing. The man who tried to erase everything was part of the soil now. Whatever drove him to it, fear, grief, guilt, it didn't matter anymore. That era had passed. His choice had nearly destroyed what made humans human. But not completely. One spark survived. That was all it took. They walked slowly, he and the girl, down the other side of the hill. The light from the seeds shimmered across the landscape now, casting long shadows and reflections on the earth that didn't make sense. Like the seeds remembered what the land used to look like and were gently trying to bring it back. Green crept through cracks in the dust. Old stone paths shimmered under layers of ash and dirt. Birdsong returned, soft at first, then steady. And for the first time in his life he heard laughter in the distance. Not his own. Not in his head. Real. He closed his eyes and listened. For a moment it was too much. His throat tightened. His eyes burned. But he didn't hide it. He let the tears fall. Quietly. Freely. The girl didn't ask why. She understood. They came across others by the time the sun reached its peak. Survivors. People like him who had wandered through the ruins of a silent world, not knowing anything had changed. They emerged slowly, uncertainly. Some wore clothes stitched from salvage. Some carried weapons that were now useless. Most had the same look in their eyes, disbelief wrapped in hope, like they couldn't trust what they were seeing. He didn't have answers for all of them. But when they asked what had happened, he told them the truth. Not the complicated parts. Not the pieces that still made his head spin. Just this: the world remembered us. And they seemed to understand. They began to follow the light. The seeds were doing more than restoring memory. They were awakening something buried in the earth. Not buildings. Not machines. But roots. Things planted a long time ago. Gardens. Shelters. Libraries carved into stone beneath forgotten cities. It was like the planet had been waiting too. The girl never strayed far from him, but she didn't need him to lead her. Sometimes she would walk ahead, quiet and calm, her bare feet leaving light footprints on ground that had been lifeless for so long. She didn't speak much, but when she did, people listened. She spoke like someone who dreamed of the world before it broke, and now she was seeing it come alive. They set up camp one night beneath the remains of a shattered tower. There was still no electricity. No fire yet. Just the glow of the seeds scattered nearby. But people sat in circles, sharing old stories, some even smiling for the first time in years. Children, ones who hadn't spoken in months, laughed when a dog, thin and dirty but joyful, ran through the camp barking at nothing. That night he lay on the ground, staring at the stars. He didn't feel alone anymore. The memories still hurt. The people he'd lost weren't coming back, not really. But their voices had made something new possible. Their echoes had saved a world. He looked at the seed beside him. He wondered if this was how things were supposed to end, or maybe how they were supposed to begin. The next day one of the seeds opened completely. Inside was a sphere of light, pulsing with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. It cast no heat. It didn't speak. But everyone near it understood. It wasn't a weapon. It was a message. A memory of what humans had once done when the stars seemed too far. How they had reached. How they had fallen. And how they could rise again. A few of the others began calling the seeds the Rememberers. You like that? Simple. Honest. The girl stood near the sphere and tilted her head like she was listening. Then she pointed east, where more lights had fallen. There are others, she said. He didn't ask how she knew. He simply nodded. That afternoon they started walking again. Each valley, each cracked city street held new signs of life. Vines curled through concrete. Trees grew out of sunken rooftops. Streams began to flow where there hadn't been water in years. And in every place they passed the same thing happened. People stepped forward. From underground bunkers. From hidden shelters. From forests no one had mapped in decades. They came not because someone told them to, but because they felt it. The world was changing. And this time they wouldn't miss it. He kept his seed with him always, even as more advanced ones were found. It was his reminder. Of silence. Of loss. Of what it cost to forget who you are. But also of what came after. He taught the children what the world used to be. He didn't sugarcoat it. He told them about the cities, the wars, the fear. But also about the music. The art. The kindness in strangers. The moments when someone with nothing still shared what they had. That was what made them human, not the tech, not the cities in the sky. And when someone asked what he'd say to those who were gone, if he could speak to them again, he said this. You didn't die for nothing. You became the voice that woke us up. You were the roots under the ashes. The girl, now older, helped guide others to the seeds. She could sense them like they called to her. She said the earth had always known what it needed to survive. It just needed us to remember we were part of it. Years passed. He grew older. Slower. But never alone. One day he stood on a mountaintop and looked out over a green world. Not perfect. Not without pain. But alive. Really alive. Cities had not been rebuilt. Not the old kind. Instead, villages and communities formed where the land allowed. They were built to last, to work with the earth instead of trying to conquer it. People worked with their hands again. Not because they had to, but because it meant something. Machines were still used, yes, but only when they helped humans, not when they replaced them. The Rememberers were planted near every settlement. Not as gods. Not as rulers. But as keepers of the truth. Of who they had been. And who they could still be. He sat under the stars one last time, older than he ever thought he'd be. The girl, now a leader in her own right, sat beside him, quiet as always. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He looked at the sky. At the stars. At the possibility. "I think," he said, "if we remember what it cost to forget, we won't make the same mistake again." She nodded. A seed pulsed nearby, casting a soft light. "Thank you," she said. He smiled. Not for the thanks, but for the world she'd live in. He leaned back, let the wind brush over his skin and closed his eyes. He had been the last. Now he was one of many. And that was enough. The stars sang quietly above them, like they'd been waiting a long time to be heard. And this time humanity listened.